Hello ladies and gentlemen, MSI has passed and LEC is upon us once again, coming this weekend. Watch me live view on Twitch as per usual, but before that happens, we gotta do tier lists, we gotta do discussions about what we expect, and we also need to talk about the changes to the format that of course will affect who the hell is going to go to, of course, the LEC playoffs, the finals, and additionally who eventually will qualify to the World Championship. So the big changes in terms of the format is that it is a lot more heavily skewed towards summer, which makes a lot of sense. The top 3 teams will qualify regardless of their championship points. So in this case, if you make top 3, you qualify. Additionally, if you win the summer playoffs, so not the finals that comes after summer playoffs, if you win it, you qualify to the World Championship. So the teams in, of course, the actual finals are competing for 2 world spots, and of course, the team that wins summer will still actively compete there. So summer split is super important. It's a lot more heavily skewed towards it. If you're curious about what's going to happen next, in terms of filling in the rest of the spots, it is of course the teams that have won winter, spring, and finally through championship points. If the same team wins back-to-back splits, and let's say G2 wins summer 2, which we can safely assume, then of course you're going to have more teams getting in through championship points. So we're going to have top 3 of summer, which most likely of course includes G2, and then 3 teams based off of championship points. In regards to where the standings are at, I think that of course SK Gaming has a chance to catch up. I think that Rogue and Karmine Corp, of course, they're in a position where making a top 3 is a must if they want to have a chance at qualifying at the World Championship. And then, the gauntlet run is a little bit heavier because 1 world spot will already be distributed in the summer playoffs. So making it to the World Championship is going to be very difficult for Rogue and Karmine Corp. Giants and, of course, SK, if they just make it up the standings, they can push other people out through points. Of course, harder for GIANTX. Even though, of course, in the case of a tiebreak, summer points are going to win out. I think that with how things are placed, usually, if you go higher up, I think that you are pretty much safe. Team Heretics, of course, might be in a little bit more of a dangerous spot if they manage to drop. But in regards to the rest, they're relatively safe in qualification, as long as there is no major imbalances where like Fnatic and Team BDS are 9th and 10th for some reason, and all of a sudden everything shakes up. But if we're going to talk about those scenarios here, we might as well put on a tinfoil hat and, call ourselves crazy because we are going to waste all of the tape to record nonsense. But nevertheless, just thought it would be important for you to know the changes to summer, very important, making top 3 to summer and winning, of course, the summer split. And then, of course, if you're curious about the seeding, it is a double elimination bracket where, of course, the 5th and the 6th seed starts in the lower bracket. And those seeds are the teams that qualify through championship points. So the seeding is, if it follows as it was in the previous year, winter winner and championship points number 1, championship points number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But now the format has changed. It's summer 1, 2, 3, and then champion points, champion points, champion points. If G2, of course, wins summer. Otherwise, it's like winter winner, spring winner, and then championship points, the final one. All right, now you're in the loop. Let's talk about the changes that have occurred with the teams. If you wanted this to be a video about the patch and how it has changed the game, maybe that's something that we can do in the future. Let me know if that's something that you want to see. But the gist of it is everything is somewhat similar, especially in the AD carry position, in terms of what I've seen in the LPL. Quite undynamic, quite boring. Corki's in the picture, AD mids, people are trying to play Yone, Tristana, just to set up for AP junglers because of how strong Fated Ashes are. Additionally, we see some Skana gameplay, the answer to Skana. We've seen Mordekai's have some success, but other than that, the usual suspects in other positions. I'm hoping to see a little bit more, excitement in the AD carry position. We saw some Ashe AD carry, that's something that has come through, but you know, we shall see. We shall see with new patches and with how creative everyone is in the LEC, maybe we get to see something. Once again, I want to focus on teams. Let's begin with G2 Esports. G2 Esports, of course, maintained their own roster. They just announced that they've re-signed Broken Blade with a beautiful, heartfelt video. I suggest that you check it out. G2, of course, is the #1 contender. I think that there is no discussion about it. G2 is, of course, the team that is the flag bearer of the LEC. They did us proud in regards to, of course, MSI beating out Top Esports in a good way, being competitive against the T1. A rather weak T1, but in terms of where my expectations were, I was very satisfied. And speaking to Roma, they were very happy with their progression. I think a hallmark of a great team is a team that actively peaks when it matters the most. And usually when it matters the most is the last game that you've played. A steady progression is insanely important, and G2 as a team is the team to beat. I hope that all other 9 teams come for them with fury and vengeance. Back in 2018, when we knew we would face up against Fnatic 2018, as Vitality, we designed our teams surrounding the fact that we wanted to beat them. We wanted to beat them, and we chased after them, and we did our absolute best to challenge them because we knew that they were the best team of the region. So everything we did was in mind with beating Fnatic, and we won an occasional game or two, but in the end, of course, 2018 Fnatic is a great team, but I believe that, you know, we needed to give them a challenge regionally, and I hope that the other teams have that energy about them. I think that we can quickly just move on to the second team, which in my mind is Fnatic. You know, the main issue with Fnatic, right? I think this is a team that could really help. Like from outside, this is kind of the opposite of a hallmark team that has strong leadership, strong coaching. Of course, I can't tell from outside. We can't tell. I don't know what's going on inside the team, so I don't want to put this on the coaching staff or no. Let's just call it that this team seems to lack leadership because their ceiling is so far away from their floor and their performance is insanely inconsistent. There was a huge conversation about the video that they released where Razork was sharing his thoughts surrounding the team about how players are underperforming. He was connected to Noah, kind of choking the situation and not playing well. And then the follow-up is that June, when he sees his AD carry play poorly, that he gets tilted, and that kind of has a snowball effect on everybody. I think that still, this is a team that is individually very talented. Like, individually, this is a team that can compete on an individual basis against the likes of G2. But in terms of how their performance fluctuates, this is a team that can lose to anyone on a bad day. And the main concern here is that, you know, if the timing is wrong and the pressure is felt and the qualification to the World Championship begins to breathe down their neck and the pressure is very obvious, and they are in a situation where the pressure is on them to actually win and they are the favorites coming into a matchup, then I am concerned about Fnatic. What we can take away from MSI in my mind is that I think that Oscarinin actually had a pretty damn good tournament. I think that Oscarinin showed a lot of things that we didn't see in the LEC with his Poppy game against Impact. He had that Camille game. We saw a lot of you know, different sides to Oscarinin. His Zac gameplay was pretty solid. I think that his understanding of lane swap was solid too. So I think that's a massive plus in my mind. I think that looking at this team's progression, the main concern is, of course, that inconsistency. How will they deal with it? You know, can they add additional people to the coaching staff? They have Hedon as well, of course. Let's see how they actually dealt with this problem. We saw it publicly displayed, so Fnatic, of course, is very aware. And, you know, their main challenge is to build a level of consistency and take some of the advice of maybe of G2, of Team Liquid, in terms of how their approach is, which is, you know, a sense of togetherness and a sense of, you know, conquering their issues and facing them head on rather than sweeping them under the rug, you know. But of course, we can only work with the information we got from the video, and that is probably 0.001% of everything that a team does on a daily basis. I can relate to the frustration of that. But I can also relate to the other side that we love to speculate. You know, people watch Fnatic and Legends and just assumed that I'm a speech merchant because that's what they showed at in the Fnatic Legends and Action videos, which I can understand. But from my point of view, you know, this was like 0.1% of the job. You know, it's like we scrim, we work together 10, 12, 16 hours a day. You know, and this is where all the work is done. So I'm hopeful for Fnatic because this is a very talented roster and they can get shit done. And I think that if there's anybody that has the talent to maybe contest against the G2, it would be Fnatic. But we put them, of course, on second, which is going to number them plain and simple. The next one that I want to move to is a team that actually made a change, which is Team Vitality. I think Team Vitality, in the change in the jungle position, I have the benefit of knowing a little bit more about how Linkers works as a player. I think this is a very interesting prospect. And then knowing that Linkers and, of course, Mac and Pad had kind of a pre-existing relationship, it seems like they knew exactly what they wanted. Of course, you know, this comes from a position of having, you know, respect and trust for how Mac and Pad work. I think that Team Vitality is a team that has actively progressed. I think this is a team that works really well with players like Photon, Hilly, and Kazi. I feel like these are players that are very unique and, let's say, individualistic in their approach. I think that they function better without the rigidness and the rules of being forced to play a certain way, which I think gives us many moments where these players make highlight reels, right? And the main concern for Team Vitality is that there seems to be no decision-making that extends past, let's say, the next 30 seconds. I think that there is a severe lack of planning in regards to how they approach the game, and everything seems very spontaneous. I think that they are very mechanically good, which allows them to win 4v5s, 3v5s, and kind of scrap their way out of situations that are inherently forced and bad. But the hope is that adding Linkas to the situation here gives them a layer of consistency and structure to the game. The jungle and the super position are two positions that need to work together well in terms of how they achieve vision and control over the map and how they gain information to make sure that their solo laners in Viteo and Photon can actually manage side lanes and gather resources for themselves to become strong. I think that when this team takes even fights and they take good fights, they are a very, very formidable opponent. But the inconsistency in taking those fights always kind of puts them on a back foot. And I think that the edge they have over the other teams is that even in those circumstances, when they start fights on the back foot, they've managed to win. And I think that's mostly off of the back of Photon and Kazi. For those who don't know, Kazi as a player is someone that is praised far and wide. I don't like the conversation that whenever an AD carry plays bad, it's like, oh, they should have gotten Kazi. I don't know, like people talking about roster changes in the middle of a season, in the middle of a tournament sometimes. Kazi, I think that playing AD carry in a team that was as sporadic as Vitality was in spring and winter is insanely difficult. Because AD carries, you know, the meme of Gumayushi that you're just an egg in a ramen bowl. Where it comes from is basically that you lack agency and you can add flavor to the soup that your team is kind of giving you, right? And I think that Kazi manages to keep CS, he keeps good position, and he needs to maneuver himself in this chaos that his team presents him sometimes, and I don't envy that at all. I don't think that there's a lot of AD carries that could manage it as, let's say, fluidly as Kazi does. And I think that mechanically super good. He was very sharp on all of the meta champions. And I think that Kazi and Hylissang as a duo is insanely deadly. I think this is a duo that has shown very high peaks in terms of what they can achieve. And I think that Hilly is on a team where he is allowed to express himself. But I have to say as well, winter for Hilly was very, very rough. Spring was better, but there was definitely moments where he also threw games. And the main hope for Vitality in terms of my prediction now to put them on the third spot is to, let me just see if I can, change the background color to something better. That's maybe blue. Well, blue is kind of nice, but that's also kind of a flashbang. Let me see. Everything is horrible, actually. Let's just do gray. Screw it. So Vitality on third. A big part of this is like, of course, the conversation is like, will they beat out a team like BDS? The big part for me here is that I think that Linkas is going to add a layer of structure that is going to improve them. And I have been very happy with the progression of Team Vitality, but there could be definitely a world where BDS is going to beat them out. I think that these are two teams that are going to combat each other. Viteo, I think, has been quite, let's say, silent as a player, dying on side and being kind of a passenger on the team. I think there's been occasional like Riot Games where he's been good. I'm hoping to see more from Viteo on this team. I think that that's where they can find improvements in the jungle and, of course, the mid lane position. I think that's where they can find the most improvements for Vitality. Team BDS, I guess it's a perfect time to move on to them. It's a team that didn't make any roster changes. Team BDS, I think that the biggest surprise is Ice. I think Ice, in winter, I thought that he was just another ghost, meaning that he was very good at playing Ashe, Varus, and occasional Jhin as well, and they were very committed to that style of play. But we've seen such a different side to Ice, of course, in the spring split, where it's very obvious that Team BDS made a very conscious decision surrounding what Ice's role is going to be on the team. And I think that this team, BDS, has now created this identity surrounding how good their bot lane actually is. It's like, if I think of Team BDS, I think of Ice and Labrov. They are the most interesting aspect of this team in my mind. And I think that, in terms of the things that Team BDS worked on in spring specifically, makes me hopeful for them. I think that Adam tried to play the Gragas and the range champs, and this is something that was heavily lacking, right? A big criticism of mine towards Adam was no Rumble, no TF, and these were champions that were staple in the meta. He played this Kisante, and his god champs just hate playing against these ranged champions. Whenever someone was capable of playing Jace, Cannon, Rumble, if they were good at it, they could, really put a chokehold on Adam. And even though Adam might be like the best Olaf player to play in those matchups, to be shoehorned into those champions was definitely a point of contention. It was a very, very big problem for Team BDS. And I think that Team BDS were very conscious about the fact that this is Adam's weakness, and they decided, to put him on champs that are, a little bit outside of the counter. I think was a good thing. But still, the way he performed on those was quite lackluster. At some point, Adam as a player, I think that in the beginning, his, champions where he, was, very, very good at was a strength of his, right? To be kind of a southpaw in the league and, function in a team that maybe puts attention elsewhere, and then he sneaks in, bans, and opens up for the rest of the pool. We've gotten to the point where those champions aren't as dangerous. And I think that it needs to be kind of an ace in his sleeve rather than an ace that he throws always in the face of the opponent, like he's Gambit, which is ironic because Twisted Fate is something that he likes to play less. So I'm hoping that that has been a big focus for Team BDS coming into summer, because they've added that layer for Ice and they've tried to add that layer for Adam, and we shall see. I think Nuclear Int, I think that when it comes to Nuke, I think his biggest strength is playing mages. Not necessarily because of the lanes or something, but I think that in terms of how they position surrounding objectives, I think that Nuke has a very important vision and a very, very important role in that. I think that we always say on my stream, protect the dick push, fight from the dick push. I think this is something that Nuke does super, super well, and I'm hoping to see, let's say, more sides to Nuke. You know, can he play the Tristana actively well? How he's going to do on a Corki? You know, I think these are champions that play a little bit different, and I think that when he has to play champions that play themselves different, it kind of, this is what I like Nuke less as a player. But Team BDS as a whole, I think that in terms of their pressure in the 3v3 on mid lane, I think this is something they are very good at. I think that Labrov is legit the key player. Like Labrov and Ice, the key players. I can definitely see a world where BDS just beat out Vitality. I think now that as I'm talking about it, I think that Vitality comes with a level of risk that is potentially higher, and I can see a Team BDS, jumping above them. But let's leave this in the air. Let's put them together for now, and then maybe I'll make a decision later, so we don't get stuck on these two teams too harsh. But I think the trajectory of Team BDS is interesting for sure. Next in line, I need to think a little bit, because now it's where it gets, I guess, Mad Lions needs to be the team, right? I think Mad Lions, in terms of their early game, honestly, they've been one of the better, if not the best early game team of the LEC. I think in terms of how they connect with support, in terms of invading camps and tracking camps, I think they do this super, super well. I think in terms of how they take over River in the early game and then collapse that into bot lane ganks, I think this is something they do very well. Where am I less impressed with this team? I feel like, in spring in particular, I think that when, to my surprise, I think that Elioya is a very strong jungler, but I think that when I think there was cases where he needed to play mechanically well to excel. I think that this is something that he didn't really deliver on. I think that when he plays as Ivan and plays as Sejuanis and he plays the Zinzals, I think these are champions that kind of play themselves, and I think that this is something that Elioya does well, because I think his strength is keeping track of information and maintaining. But then I remember his Jax game or his Rengar game, where I was a lot less impressed with his mechanical skill, which is not really the box that I would put Elioya in the past. There was maybe an occasional like Velvet game where I was like, ooh, this doesn't look too good. Elioya seems to be more of a cerebral player now than ever. I think that when it comes to the second most impressive player on this team, maybe the most impressive, is Alvaro. I think that the support pool has gotten quite exciting in Europe in my mind, and I think that Alvaro is a very solid player, and that goes hand in hand with, of course, what Elioya achieves. I think that the magic of Midwin has kind of worn off. I think that there was a uniqueness that was quite impressive in Winter with his many different carry champs. He played the Akali top against us and he smashed Wunder, who was playing the Jax. He was pulling Gwen bans when nobody else was playing it. He dropped the Fiddlesticks against the Rumble. He played some Varus top too. I think that that is a very, very interesting weapon to have in your back pocket, but sometimes the champions in the meta are just too strong, and then you need to kind of face facts. The players that have spent more time playing the meta are going to have an advantage, and I think we saw some of that, of course, in spring. So Midwin, I hope that he finds a way to become unique again. That awkward player to prepare against. Frescaue, I think, has been serviceable. There's something about Frescaue playing against Humanoid where he looks like the GOAT and Humanoid just looks bad. I feel like Frescaue's reputation has been carried by those games, but I feel like Frescaue is very similar to the other mid laners that have been added, where I don't think that they are smart enough surrounding how they funnel resources to themselves in terms of how far they allow themselves to push side lanes and manage side lanes. I think this is where Humanoid and also Caps, mostly Caps, has an advantage over everybody else in terms of pulling that attention to be able to push side lane and gather resources. Frescaue seems to be the type of player that really goes with the flow of the game. I also in regards to Supa, I'm not gonna drop the meme on him where he said he's the best AD because, you know, in the end, it's like, if you want to become the best, you need to work as if, you know, a person that is the best, you know, you need to put in the work every single day. I'm not gonna fault anyone for having, you know, any type of mindset, but in the end, I understand the other side of it. You know, it's fun to clown on people. It's fun to clown on APA when he runs it down after talking shit in all chat. You know, that's the risk that they take. And obviously these guys are professionals. So in the end, you know, it's a part of the job to be able to take, you know, the criticism of the community. That's if there's no community to give you criticism, there's no money, because then if you kind of shave everything down, and what do you really have? You have a bunch of guys playing a video game. We don't really create any value if it isn't for the entertainment. But Mad Lions as a whole, I think this is a team that, as the game progresses, I think that they are trying to do too much in every situation. You know, if you're a team that manages to secure early game leads in terms of how you close out and how you kind of end games and finish games, I think that you need to be able to kind of like a switch, you know? It's like early game you elevate risk, but when the position kind of can play itself, you should limit risk. If you are stacking dragons and the enemy needs to be the aggressors, then you don't need to give them an opportunity to, of course, accelerate their return into the game. I don't know how many games Mad Lions overreach, they try to overdive, they try to squeeze, they try to pursue leads that ultimately won't change their position in the game. And if Mad Lions somehow can harness that, I find a little bit of a better balance in the way they approach the draft too, I think that things could work out for them. But I think that the main issue for Mad Lions is that I think when range supports need to be played, or the bot lane meta is a little bit different and they cannot contest river actively, or if they over-index on the early game and that they fall off in the mid to late game due to that over-indexing on the early game, I think this is where they find most of the losses, where either they overreach in the mid to late game to pursue deeper leads, or when they draft too heavily for the early game and they eventually get outscaled even with leads. But I think the most interesting aspect of this is that you have a mid laner that prefers to play very supportive champs. You have Elioya as well, a player that prefers to does better on the supportive champs, the simplified champs and the Xin Zhaos and the Sejuanis, and then you have the carry in the top lane position and the AD carry position. And I wonder if Elioya can find that side to himself where he plays the carry champions once again, because I think that would work very neatly with how Frescawi and Alvaro work as players. If we come into this meta and all of a sudden he's playing Nidalee and Talia, he's playing carry champions in the jungle, and that's what he's focused on, I think that, you know, a player like Frescawi and Alvaro could really set him up for success. So I hope we get to see that pivot, because as I mentioned before, the Jax and the Rengar left me a little bit concerned. But then again, you know, the other junglers were just a little bit stronger, of course, on the spring meta, you know, with the Maokais and whatever the fuck. So I hope that Elioya reinvents himself as the carry through Frescawi and Alvaro as well. But I think that Mad Lions, I'll put them, where are they? I guess it's Koi. This is Koi, right? Now, the main question now I am battling with my mind here is between Koi and Team Heretics. So SK is the other one, right? But I do have to say that I'll probably put Team Heretics and Koi above SK. More on SK later. Team Heretics, I think that this is a team. So they changed the coaching staff. That was like the main change that they've made. I feel, you know, my issue with this team is that I feel like in terms of just the mechanical talent of this team, in terms of fight execution, I feel like they win against teams that lose against themselves. I do think this is a team that eventually, can close out games if they are slow enough or if the enemy invites it. But I think that whenever I see situations where teamfights are a little bit more even, there's some things that happen that are just plain and simple surprising. Opportunities not taken. There were moments where I remember Zvyro not pulling the trigger, Jankos not being as sharp as I want him to be. And I feel like this is the story of the team. I feel like this is a team, like if I take this team in contrast to a Team Vitality, Fnatic or G2, I just don't feel like they are mechanically there, Like when I think of what this team identity is in terms of the early game, Flacket and Trimby, I don't think that they are the strongest laners. I feel like Trimby wants to get out of that lane. I feel like they want to get out of the early game as fast as possible. They want to find simplified group team fights. They kind of remind me of like a very, very old school BDS that kind of just structures their gameplay around objectives and try to simplify as much as possible. But I feel like in that simplification, you also lose out on a little bit of a soul. I feel like this is a team that is going to fall on the wayside over time. And as I think about this team, even though I love Wunder, I love Jankos as well, Trimby is a homie, the Polish power here. I feel like Mad Lions, even though they come with a little bit more risk, I feel like this Mad Lions team just has a little bit more of a higher upside to me. So I do believe that I have to put Team Heretics below them as I think about it. I'll put Team Heretics right below them. We still are undetermined about the BDS Vitality placement. Next in line is SK. I think that's the biggest change. I think that there is a big discussion to be had about how visceral the reaction was from the community. It's like, the community is so silly sometimes. It's quite disappointing how, when people watch and consume their entertainment in a stupid way, meaning not that people are stupid, it's just that with minimum effort. It's like, it's the way I consume football or consume Formula One. It's like, I don't know anything about an engine. I don't know shit. I say, this guy didn't take the turn, but I just talk shit at the screen, And the conversation I was surrounding SK is like, oh, LEC is turning into LCS 2.0. It's like, in my mind, when it comes to player acquisition, it's like every GM has the obligation to, of course, look at every pool of players. And then you need to assess those players through the same lens as you assess anyone. What kind of resources do you need to enable them? What kind of environment would they be enabled in? What is their potential as a player? What is their background like? How are they going to fit into the roster and the dynamic that you've built in? How is going to function with the team? How good is he in terms of raw skill? These are all questions that you have to answer regardless of where they are from. Because in the end, right, regardless of if they are from Korea, if they're from China, or whether they are from Belgium, or whether they are from Sweden or Denmark, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. In the end, it's just a question of how much output are they going to have at your club. If you're signing a player just because he's Korean, you're trolling. If you're signing a player just because he's won championships in the past, you're trolling. If you are signing a player just because he's a rookie and he won an ERL tournament, you're trolling too. Because in the end, these are things that, sure, you have control over winning trophies or whatever, but these are things that are just titles. It's very surface level information. You need to always dig deeper. And I think as a GM, if I was a GM on a team, I'm going to look at every motherfucking player base possible. Because I need to find the talent that is going to improve my team. Whatever these players are going to do in the future, I don't need to care about. Are they going to do well by my club? And do I have the resources to support them? Can I afford to support them to the max? That's the only metrics that I go by. I don't give a damn where people are from. Because I'm telling you, there's European players that don't communicate in-game. There's European players that don't communicate outside of the game. And there's Korean players that are very, very engaged, and there's Korean players that are very disengaged and are very disinterested. And I think this conversation is very important to have. I have to say, in regards to the two players, if we put them through the lens of that, Rahel and Luon, I looked at some games of Luon. I am not so impressed. I don't think that this is a player that is super, super exciting. Rahel, on the other side, I think that this could be an interesting player. I think that he's going to be able to do well. But the main challenge here is that I haven't heard any conversation about who SK Gaming is adding to the staff to make them feel comfortable. I think that, you know, in regards to replacing their own bot lane, if we look at it through that lens, Executing were not having a good time. They've played through enough time. And in regards to them not promoting their ERL bot lane, which was Neon and Limit, you know, I think it's just a question of, you know, are you in a position where, like, with the information of how scrims are going, how they work with the team, SK Gaming is a team that is working on a budget. Of course, I know the GM of SK, so he's a friend and so forth. I can admit that there is some sense of bias here. But if you're in a world where you have that much more information, you don't want to promote you guys, I think that there is some reason to it, right? And an additional piece of information that you can have here as well, maybe we should make this into a bigger video, you know, talking about importing and so forth. Additional piece of information here is, I think that people sometimes don't understand how expensive buyouts are for your favorite ERL bot laner. A lot of these ERL teams want to make the money back and they don't want to lose out on a player mid-season. It's a big thing. And sometimes the contracts aren't super favorable for the players that have signed those contracts in the first place. So keep in mind that there's a lot of dynamics at play. But I think the Luon, not super exciting. I feel like Luon was put in here to piece together with Rahel, which to some degree makes sense. I am worried, you know, in regards to the resource department, they haven't added like a coach that can maybe bind them together with the rest of the team. But I believe if SK, you know, to take a gamble like this, I think considering their investment here, yeah, maybe Irrelevant is not going to be in the team. It is the player that is talked about a lot. Niski is a player that is, you know, is a very solid player, right? SK Gaming, this is kind of a Hail Mary for them to catch up in the points, because, you know, I think they needed to do something drastic in order to have any chance to qualify to the World Championship. I think this is a team that has looked relatively lifeless. I feel like Isma and Shio share a very similar issue, is that I think if they play a game where level 1, 2, 3, they're very, very busy and they can keep up momentum in the game, I think they're very good. But if they have to full clear into full clear, I kind of feel like they lose their mind a little bit too fast. I think that Isma is the most extreme version of that. That first week that he played with SK, he was looking very good, because I think people and teams were not used to what Isma was doing. But now, a simple message, now you could say simply to your players, Isma really likes to fight level 2, he likes to fight level 3, let's ward these locations, and all of a sudden we've diffused him as a player. And sure, that weakness can turn into a strength, because all of a sudden, if you are the type of player, the same conversation we had about Adam, if he has those aces in his sleeve and he doesn't need to throw them all the time, he will create a kind of an aura of concern for the opposition. But if you're throwing that card perma, in the end, you know, it's no longer an ace up your sleeve. You know, everyone just knows that this trick is coming. And maybe this is something that Isma can work on. But I think SK from their position need to be taking risks. But I am not super sold. I think that this is a team that will limp into playoffs and will struggle. But I do have to say that from the little information and the little gameplay I've seen from Rahel, he seems to be a decent player. Let's see how that pans out. And next in line, you know, we have the trio at the bottom. We have KC, Rogue, and Giants. I think that there's a world where KC even make it above SK Gaming. I think that, this is a roster, KC, this is a roster full of, I call them mercenaries, It's like they put in Closer here, Kana here. Closer didn't have a strong end of season over in the LCS. But this is a player that has won in the past. I say that because even though 100 Thieves was a very, very bad team, to be perfectly honest, there's been moments in time where Closer has won. And I think it was very evident that at some point, I wish that I had more time with the roster, but it was very evident that the Targamas bow situation wouldn't improve, right? And usually jungle and support are the biggest driving forces behind how you manage the game. And I think that Targamas, Closer, these are two experienced players. I think that these are two players that are going to be able to uplift, the inconsistency of the macro. I think Closer is a lot worse mechanically. I think that he will express himself less in fights. But if you don't know how to set up fights, or you don't know how to, put yourself in position to actually take good fights, it doesn't matter how good you are mechanically. So I think the hope here for KC is the Closer is going to get them through the door together with Targamas, macro-wise, which I think is a big plus. And I think that additionally, Vladi and Kana, I do believe that they should have a better understanding of how to manage side lanes, which I think is another crucial detail of course, how your macro plays out. So I think that, in that sense, I do think that this is a decent put together roster knowing KC's position, right? KC, in terms of their changes, people are talking about, they should have replaced Targamas, but I think that they are holding on to Targamas, giving him more time and putting him together with a different jungle, because I think that in the future, they want to still see Targamas and Kalist play together as a duo because of the success they've had. I think that people talked about why did Abedage not choose to play in the LEC. I believe the offer that Abedage got was that you get to play this split, which I think would have been better for Vladi to finish his year in the LFL with the squad. Vladi is a little bit rushed into the LEC, I would say, but this is a player that I think that has a decent, good potential, but I hope that he doesn't get thrown to the wolves if KC don't manage to piece it together here. I think that KC is going to look at what they want to hold intact and then rebuild coming into the next year, including Kalist in the project. I think Upset is one of the most talented players. I think that in the situation that the KC team was in, I think that when the environment is very tenuous and stressed due to the pressure of the result, I do think that Upset is a player that performs a lot more reserved, It's like people, the simplified version is people call him like a KDA player or whatever. But I think in terms of his ceiling, what he shows in practice and in scrims, I think that when other things fall into place, I think this is a player that does super, super well. So I think as long as the other things fall into place, I think that Upset will, make sure that his star shines again. Kana, might have been a weird signing for most people. Like the same question here is like, how are they going to make him comfortable? Kana is a player that usually, focuses on like 2-3 champs, rotates them over and over, like Renekton, Renekton. I think that Kana is a player in Europe, I think he's going to do just fine. I don't think that Kana is going to be a liability. I don't think that he's going to, have issues, I don't think he's going to have issues necessarily. So I do expect this roster to be able to do better than the previous two splits. So I'm going to put KC higher than 10th. I'm going to put them here. And now the main question is, am I going to put them above SK Gaming, That is like the main question for me here. So next in line is Giants. I think Giants probably to me looks like the least exciting. I feel like, they made a change in the top lane position with Odoamne, But, you know, maybe the improvement here with the Antonio coming in is that you will now have a top laner that won't say in draft, pick me Jace in the deciding game of the season. That's maybe the benefit, you know, maybe some you know, like a commitment to an identity here could be cool, right? Like if Giants, you know, they managed to go, you know, it was funny because Giants and Rogue looked like the best teams in Europe in week 3 of regular split. And I can see a world where if the Antonio just says, yo, I'm going to be a tank player, eat shit, be 30 CS behind every game and commit to the identity of Ignar, Juhan, and Patrick just playing together in bot side and getting advantages, I could see that working. Maybe the Antonio is going to be more bought in to that identity than an Odo Amna was, because Odo Amna was playing a lot of carry champions top, which was weird, you know. I just don't place him on that, you know. Even though he has a history of that, I feel like, you know, maybe the benefit here is that he's a role player. I do think the Antonio is a worse player than Odo Amna, but sometimes a worse player that is more bought into what you want to achieve can be more effective to the identity that you're trying to strive for. Because I could easily see the Ignar, Juhan, you know, duo taking over the map on bot side, playing around Patrick. You know, these are players that have showcased that they can be very, very good. And then Giants did have a successful week 3, right? So maybe that's the move. I think that Jackie's, you know, is a rookie player, right? He's, you know, showcased some moments of, you know, good gameplay. He seems to be, let's say, bold in his approach. You know, a lot of players are more reserved when they are starting in the league, reserved. But I like that Jackie's is not afraid to make a fool of himself, because I think that it showcases a player that is striving for more. So I can definitely see a world where the Giants project works playing around bottom side. But, you know, I think that the predictable element of Giants has always been the main issue, you know. I think that in terms of them setting up dives on bot, if you manage to secure a pushing bot and all of a sudden Ignar can't be in a position where he dominates the map or can move around as freely, I think that this team just loses all of their shine almost instantly. But I'm excited to see Juhan in here. I'm hoping that this team manages to find a way to model around him, you know, because as mentioned before, we're seeing a lot of carry junglers, but patches can happen and you can get smacked down very quickly. So we'll see how Juhan manages to express himself there. So I'm going to put Giants 9th this time around and then Rogue 10th. I'm sorry, Rogue. I feel like Rogue only take wins of teams that are so dysfunctional that they lose against themselves. This is the epitome of inactivity, and it gets to the point where I almost hope that next year there will be announced that there is a new franchisee that has bought the Rogue spot. I feel like this is a team that needs a complete revamp. This team has lacked a soul for a very long time, and with the departure of key players that were a part of winning their championship back in 2022 in summer, this team is just a shell of itself. And I feel like it's hard to point the blame on anyone specifically, because I do think that each player on this roster probably would do better on a different team. So at this point, I think Rogue just plays spoiler. No pressure on you. Maybe, just maybe, you can make something happen. Maybe. So we have Rogue last place, and then we're going to put, honestly, I'm going to put KC above SK, man. I want to put KC above SK. Rock and roll, man. I from watching Vladi, right? From watching Vladi, this is a player that knows farm distribution. He knows how to, you know, break through in the farm department. And I could see a world where even, you know, Team Heretics KC blast through them, honestly. I could see a world where KC go above Team Heretics too. I think that the main question is, right, can Closer and Targamos together get this team through the door? Meaning through the door, can they actually be in position to take fights? Can they be in positions to actually contest objectives? Because this is the main thing that KC was lacking. They had good early games. I think in spring a lot less so. In spring there was a complete lack of identity, I feel like, and a complete shutdown of confidence. KC carry on with that, maybe it's a disaster. So I guess maybe just temporarily now we keep it like this. And then in regards to Team BDS and Vitality, I'm gonna go with the gut feeling here of putting Vitality as third. That's what I'm gonna go for. And honestly, I think that's a good place to have it. I'm happy there. What changes would you make? If you want to know my predictions for the LEC matches, then just like if G2 is above the standings, then G2, I take G2 as the winner, right? Plain and simple. So there's that. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you would change. Let me know if you think I'm crazy. Let me know your crazy prediction. I'm expecting these 4 teams to be in the World Championship at the end of the year. I think these are the 4 that are going to get in there. And then probably, like, just because I'm putting Vitality third, I guess we are predicting them to make the World Championship. But this, of course, is very fleeting. The nature of competition is that things can change very fast and violently. And there is a world where, you know, anything can happen. Anything can happen. But if you want to see KC at the World Championship, pressure's on. You need to make top 3. And we shall see. We shall see. All right. That's it. Bye-bye.